Hi guys, my name's Ben Guilford. I'm the owner of the Firebrick Company, and in this video I'm going to be walking you through how to assemble our steel frame stand kit. Pretty excited to be introducing our steel frame stand. This is something we have been working on for a very long time. Now, we've been selling steel frame stands for many years, but they were fully welded assemblies. The problem with that was we couldn't send them overseas. We could only send them around Australia, and we're wanting to take care of all of our customers all over the world. So we have made a flat pack steel stand kit where everything is included. You just need some basic tools to assemble it, and you'll be doing up a bunch of bolts to create this incredibly strong steel frame stand. So before I get into the how to assemble it, I'll just a couple of highlights of the design. Firstly, it's massively over-engineered. All the material thicknesses are well and truly above what is actually necessary. These brackets are much thicker than they need to be. The tubing's thicker than it needs to be. But I really wanted to create something that I didn't have to worry about. Okay, because we're going to be sending these all around the world. You're going to be building a wood-fired oven on top, which weighs a lot, and you need to have the confidence that this thing is not going to fall apart on you, that it's not going to deteriorate, it's not going to collapse, and I can guarantee that it will not. All right, we've actually done load testing on this frame. We put 4.5 metric tons of weight on it, and it barely moved. So very, very strong, very confident in the design, and we're really excited to see these out there. And you might be saying, well, do I want one of these? And maybe you're wanting to build one of our precast ovens, but you're just not that excited about building a brick or a block stand. You look at that process and you think, oh, I could maybe do that, but I think I'd rather have, if there was an alternative stand, maybe you'd rather have that. So this is well worth looking at if that's you. One of the other benefits of these steel frame stands is we have designed these such that you can put a pallet jack underneath it, jack it up and move it around. So that if you wanted to take your oven with you, or if you wanted to relocate your oven in the future, by building it on this steel frame, you're allowing yourself to do that in future. So if you order one of our steel frame stands, you're going to get a box something like this, particularly if you're in America or Canada or somewhere overseas. If you're in Australia, you're going to get a kit that looks slightly different, but the contents are going to be the same, just the packaging will be different. Right, so it's in a very heavy duty box. First thing we need to do is crack it open. So we've got these spring clips holding it in. You can use a big screwdriver, or you could also use a pry bar to get into it. Do recommend wearing some gloves because you're working with spring steel, but also splinters and things like that. So get some gloves on, and then you can just pop these clips off. They literally pop off, and then we'll start unboxing it. All right, we've got our clips off. Now we can open the box. Yeah. Okay, and we'll have a look at the contents. So first thing we've got is our instructions here. Nice big A3 instructions for you. And on the second page, you've got to find a checklist and all the components in the kit. What we want you to do is just go through all of the components, double check that you've got everything there. We have 2 people sign off on every single thing that goes into these kits, but we would appreciate you doing your own check, because if something's missing, that means we can send it out to you very quickly before you start assembling your stand, okay? But trust me, everything should be in there. All right, so we're going to start going through these components. We'll get it all out. So this is our steel frame kit. We have our components and bolts. There are no nuts for you to do up. You say, well, hang on, if you've got bolts, don't you need nuts? We have something better. We have nut certs. So all of our steel tubing back here is actually laser cut, and it has hexagonal holes in it that we have installed nut certs into. They're M10, so it's a 10 millimeter nut, and very, very strong. And they are already set up for you. All you have to do is follow the instructions and put the bolts in. Okay, now we've got these video instructions. I'm going to walk you through how to assemble this frame. We've also got written instructions, so please make sure you refer to those written instructions. You don't technically need to watch this video. If you follow those instructions, you will be absolutely fine. Okay, but I've got all our components here. They're laser engraved with its identification marking, with the exception of our angle bracing, which are so easy to figure out that we figured we didn't need to engrave those ones. That's our tubing, so that's what's going to make up the bulk of the frame, but to hold the tubing together, we need brackets. So for the brackets, we have our perpendicular bracket, we have our gusseted bracket here, and we have our 90-degree angle brackets. And with these three brackets, we'll be able to assemble our tubing into something that looks a lot more useful than it does now. And finally, to turn the steel frame into a usable benchtop, we have our 25mm compressed cement sheet. This comes in sections, and you'll attach that to the top of the frame using the liquid nails that's provided. Okay, so let's just get into it, and I'll walk you through the whole process. But before I do that, it is only suitable for our PreCast oven range. So we're making steel frames to suit our PreCast ovens. For our brick oven range currently, we'd still be recommending you go and build something with brick, block, etc. Okay, but enough of that. Let's start building. Now, you will need some tools to put this together. First tool you're going to need is actually gloves, all right? Technically not a tool, but critical to this process because laser cut steel can be sharp, all right? So want to make sure you're wearing some gloves to protect your hands. You are going to need something to tighten up your bolts. Now, for the most part, you're just going to use your hands to snug them up hand tight, and then you could use a spanner or you could use yourself a ratchet, all right? But if you're lazy and you have some tools, an impact driver, very handy. Okay, not critical. You don't have to use one of these. You could do it all with hand tools, but if you're in a hurry, then, well, power tools, I mean, power tools are awesome. Why wouldn't you use them? So I'm going to follow the instructions step by step and just start putting it together. The key thing to say right at the start is don't do the bolts up tight. You're going to do that at the very end. So we're just going to do the bolts hand tight to begin with. The first step to assemble the steel stand is to attach the brackets to the steel tubing. You'll see that the tubing has engraved lettering on it. Now that doesn't just tell you what part this is, so in this case this is FT and FB, but it also gives you an orientation because each of the parts has nutserts on different faces, and it's really important that you put the brackets on the right face. So we've got very easy to follow written instructions showing you the orientation of each bracket, but importantly, we've used this engraving to help you orient the part in relation to those brackets. Okay, so in this case, FT and FB, I've got those here. On FT, I need to put two of the gusseted brackets, and they need to be pointing with their flat face up, bolted on like this. Okay, and then below that, I've got FB, and that's wanting two of these simple 90-degree angle brackets on this face here. Okay, if you ever find yourself confused, feel free to call us. We'll be more than happy to help, but just go back to your written instructions as well and just make sure you've got the orientation of the tubes right before you get started. Before you start assembling all of the sections together, one thing I do need to point out is that you should be building on a flat and level surface. Okay, so if you're building on a really uneven surface, you may find that because of the tolerance in all of the brackets and the connections, that you could end up with one leg sitting a little higher than the others. So if you build on a flat and level surface, then you're just setting yourself up for success there. The other thing is to sweep that surface before you get started so that you don't get sand and grit into the nutserts, because that obviously would just make it a lot harder to get those bolts done up. They'll still work, but doing up a bolt in a sandy nut is not that much fun. So make sure you select the area carefully. You could actually even build it indoors. We've designed the stand so that you can get it through a standard doorway. So you can build a stand indoors and bring it out when you're ready. So for the next step to start actually assembling all of this, we will start with parts FT, FB, and two of the parts labeled B, plus one of our angle braces. And then we're going to set them out following the orientation shown in the written instructions, which I'll show you here as well. All right, so we've got FB and FT, both with their lettering pointing towards me, and then I have B lettering here and B facing up here. Okay, and you'll see that these brackets actually sit under here. Okay, and same on that side. And then we've got our angle bracket here. That's just slotting in there. So at this point now, same process, we're gonna get our bolts and washers and just start putting in bolts in these points here. So we'll need bolts here and here, and here, and then we'll need one here and one here to hold the angle bracket. Something some of you might notice when you're doing this is some of your brackets are a bit loose, okay? Do not worry about that at all. We are only doing them up finger tight, so they will still be a bit loose, but once you get the other components onto them, everything will firm up. Same thing when you're doing these angle braces. You may notice that initially, when you set it out, you can't line up the bolts, but that's because everything is still very loose. So this actually helps to square it all up. So see how I can adjust that, and bring that in, line up that hole, and get my bolt in there. The next parts to go on are AR, AL, DR, and DL. Okay, so AL is going to go here. Okay, so AL and AR, DL and DR. So those parts went on nice and easily. A quick check you can do at this point is to make sure that all of your perpendicular brackets are facing in the same direction. Okay, let's say I'd put this piece on upside down, the brackets would be pointing out the other way, and you'd sort of see it very quickly. So undo 2 bolts, flip it over, and bolt it back up in the correct orientation, and away you go. And that's what I love about this process is it's very forgiving. It's quite straightforward. So yeah, there's no point where you can stuff it up irretrievably. Okay, so please don't worry. All right, next parts to go on are the 2 remaining B sections. All right, we have them here, nice and easy. So that's going to go on there, and our other B section is going to go on here. Now, we'll say at this point, all of our rectangular stands are going to follow the same naming convention, the same process. They might be slightly bigger. They may have more beams crossing the center, okay? But they'll all be much the same, all right? So this is our smallest steel frame. In the future, we'll be making bigger ones. So just keep that in mind. If you're watching this and thinking, well, hold on, my stand needs to be a bit bigger than that, it will be. This is just the smallest one that we're using for our videos. Okay, so we're done with this orientation. What we need to do now is actually roll it forward. So get yourself a friend to help you. Okay, my friend is behind the camera and flatly refuses to help me. So I'm just gonna do it by myself. But if you have a friend who can help you, then it gives you a little bit more control over the tilting process. But very simple. I'm just gonna jump on the other side, grab these 2 and pull it towards me and lower it down to the ground. The next 2 parts to go on are the ones marked G for golf. Okay, and there are 2 of those. You'll see one of them has gusseted brackets. The other one has just simple 90-degree brackets. The 90-degree brackets are to go down the bottom. Okay, so the section marked G with the 90-degree brackets goes on the bottom here. The one with the gusseted brackets goes at the top. And you'll see that we've got gusseted brackets everywhere at the top, whereas at the bottom level, we've got the simple 90-degree brackets, and that's for strength. Okay, we're putting a huge amount of weight into the top of this frame, and we need that rigidity, particularly in the top of it. All right, so we take our gusseted G piece, we pop that in, and then we'll just do up those bolts here and in here, same on that side, and then we'll take the second G piece and put that down below and do up those bolts as well. Again, everything just finger tight for now. The next 2 pieces to go in are the diagonal bracing for the left and the right side. Okay, very simple, just 2 bolts, but remember you will need to just move the stand around a little bit to get the bolts to line up. Okay, so we've got it all together. That's actually the hardest part done. Now we just need to put in our sections marked C. So take all of those, with the C facing up, and we place them into the top of these perpendicular brackets. So we'll be putting 3 at the top here and 2 at the bottom there, and they just have 1 bolt that comes in from the underside. It's done, it's assembled. Well, it's nearly done. It's still got quite a lot of wobble in it, and that's because all of the bolts need to be done up. There are 84 bolts in this particular stand. That's a lot of bolts. And once they're all tight, that's when all of these brackets are gonna start to actually work, okay? Because right now there's just too much looseness in the system. So we're going to tighten all those up. We're gonna start going corner to corner at the top, and we're just gonna make sure that we've brought all of the parts together nice and snug. Because there's so much movement in the brackets at the moment, things can be sort of a little bit out of place, and you want everything to be nicely lined up so that the front, the sides are nice and flush with each other, and you don't have any gaps in between the pieces. Okay, you can use a mallet if you want to knock things around and so on, because some people have very strong hands. You might have done your bolts up quite tightly without even knowing it. So get everything nice and snug, and then get your ratchet or your drill, whatever you're using to do them up. I would say, as good as the impact drivers are, you get a lot more torque out of a ratchet or a spanner. So do make sure that you tighten them all up nice and tightly. Okay, now one thing I wouldn't recommend using is a full-on rattle gun. Okay, some of you might be working in automotive and you go, I'll just get the rattle gun from work. Okay, and you could really go to town on these. These are very, very strong nutsurds, but an industrial strength rattle gun could possibly, if you really pushed it, you might actually break them. So I'd prefer you didn't use those. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna work around. So starting with my top 4 corners, then I'm gonna repeat the process further down to bring them all in, tighten everything up. Something I could have mentioned earlier was you may want to check for squareness. Right now, these brackets will pull everything into an almost perfect square anyway, so it's not technically necessary to do this. But if you wanted to get really fussy, you could get out a nice framing square, get that on the corner here, and check, are you perfectly square? Okay, now I am pretty darn close, and I'm happy with that. I don't need this to be perfectly square for my oven to live on top of it and be absolutely fine. But if you said, actually, I want it to be perfectly square, then, and you knew maybe you need to pull these 2 corners together, there is a really easy method using a ratchet strap. Here's one I prepared earlier. Now you're gonna need a ratchet strap for the build of your oven anyway, so you might as well get one. So all I need to do is take one corner and just drop it in. Don't try and hook it on, it'll just slip off. Just drop it into that corner and then bring the other end over, drop that in here, just easily drop that in there. Okay, and now I can pull this in, and I could pull these 2 corners together to square all this up before I did the bolts up. Okay, but this is not strictly necessary. You don't have to do this, but it's certainly an option if you want to get like really fussy with it. So top's nice and tight. Now we're going to go around and do the same thing with the 4 corners of the bottom frame, doing up all of those, making sure that we pulled this all in nice and snug before we tighten them all up. Okay, and one of the things that you can do if you want, they should all be finger tight already, but some of them might have come undone a little bit and you're moving things around. So you could go around and just snug them all up if you prefer this method. Go around and just nip them up. So you don't put the final crank on them, but nip them all up so they're all relatively tight. And then when you're happy with the positioning of everything, then go ahead and put some real strength into them and get them all nicely tightened. So we've got our 4 corners all tightened up, top and bottom. Right, so that's effectively the legs locked off. Now we want to do the cross beams, the parts labeled C, top and bottom. The method we'll use there is we'll do up on each of them, there's 2 bolts, one on either side of the perpendicular bracket on the underside. We'll do those up first, all the way around, top and bottom. And then, once those are all tightened up, then we'll go around and do the ones that go into the side rails. All right, let's do it. And that's it. It's done. It's fully assembled now. and it's ready for a bench top. And you remember how wobbly it was before, but this is now like incredibly rigid, and that's because all of these bolts are now working together with the brackets, with the bracing to make this really, really rigid. We've actually done load testing on this stand. We've put 4.5 metric tons of weight into this stand with no issues at all. When you consider the weight of the oven that we're planning on putting on this stand is only around 600 kilos, it's well and truly over-engineered, okay? And the reason we've done that, the reason I designed it that way was that so that you could be confident that you assembling this at home, if you do up all your bolts nice and tight, it's going to hold up the oven just fine, okay? You don't have to have every joint really tight in order for this system to work. As long as you have all your brackets on, all your bolts are done up really nice and tight, then this is going to handle the weight of your oven without any issue at all. So our steel frame is fully assembled, it is rock solid, but it's still not ready for a wood-fired oven because there's holes. There's not a bench top on it. That's what we're going to solve now with our compressed fiber cement sheet. So we want to put that cement sheet down. First thing we're going to do is put liquid nails on all of the horizontal surfaces that make up the top of the frame. Before you put your liquid nails on, just give the top a quick wipe just to make sure there's no dust or oil left on the surface. Once we have that glue, we'll then take our cement sheet and attach it one piece at a time. We're just going to lay it onto that glue. And the first piece that we put at the very back, we're going to clamp that in position just to stop it from sliding around on the glue. That's going to hold it there. You could use quick grips, you could use G-clamps, any clamp will be fine. So this one's clamped. Now we can put the two center ones on and then we'll put the front one on and clamp that. To make sure that this stand is strong, you'll find that the edges of the compressed cement sheet will always rest on one of these steel beams all the way around its perimeter. And finish with our front piece, and we'll clamp the front piece as well to stop that from moving around. Something you may find with one or two pieces of your compressed cement sheet is that there's a very slight bend in them, very slight bow. And if that's the case, then you might have a piece that's sitting up a little bit high and not contacting that bed of glue. So to overcome that, just grab a clamp. Again, any kind of clamp will do, and pop that on and just pull it down until it's contacting that glue. Do the same thing on the other side, and you'll find that once that glue sets, it'll hold them perfectly. But even if you do have some inconsistencies in your bench top, it actually doesn't matter because you're going to tile this surface anyway. This is not a finished surface, so you're going to cover this with tiles or something like that. And so any little inconsistencies will be covered by those tiles. So with the boards in place, we now just need to let it sit for at least 12 hours to let that glue set. And then once it's set, we can take off our clamps and we are ready to build a wood-fired oven, which is always such an exciting project. So I hope you've enjoyed this video about our steel frame stand. If you have any questions about it, or if you're building one and you have some questions about the construction, remember we are here to help you Monday to Friday, 16 hours a day, customer support. Please just pick up the phone and call us, and myself and my team will be really happy to help you.